Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones! How are you today? Let me ask you all something. What comes to mind when I say the words favorite game? For some of us, it's a game we played when we were younger that we're just particularly nostalgic for. For some of us, it's a game we played recently that just left a really strong impression. Well, in celebration of this month marking 20 years since it was first localized, God, I'm old, I'm taking a look at my favorite game of all time, the PS1 classic, Legend of Mana. Mana? 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 Look, I've been saying Mana for 20 years, but apparently it is Mana, so I'm just gonna try and lean into that. More often than not, when people talk about the series of Mana, they generally only talk about the first 3 games. Seiken Densetsu 1, known in America as Final Fantasy Adventure, was released for the Game Boy in 1991, and kicked off what would become the series of Mana. Then in 1993, we got the sequel, which most people know and love as Secret of Mana, and the follow-up to that, Seiken Densetsu 3, was well known in the fan translation community until it finally got an official localization under the name Trials of Mana in 2019's Collection of Mana for the Nintendo Switch, which included itself and the previous 2 titles. Not to mention, within the past 5 years, all 3 of these games got full-blown remakes, with the most recent one being Trials of Mana earlier this year. And while an official Seiken Densetsu 4 wouldn't exist for another 11 years after Seiken Densetsu 3, when 2006's Dawn of Mana was released for the PS2, there was a spin-off title to fill that void in 1999 for the PlayStation 1. Seiken Densetsu Legend of Mana, localized in June of 2000 as simply Legend of Mana. Unlike the first 3 titles, Legend of Mana has never really gotten any ports, remakes, or re-releases, except for in 2011 when it was put onto the PlayStation Network. By the way, this is the version I'll be playing in this video, because as I found out last year when I originally planned to do this episode, I ran into a consistent glitch with my physical copy that made it literally impossible to beat the game. I also want to get a quick disclaimer out of the way before we really get started. This is my favorite video game. I know I said that already, but I'm sorry in advance if this isn't my funniest video. I really just want to gush and share with all of you why I love this game as much as I do. When you start a new game, you're given the option to choose between 2 protagonists. Except for a couple small changes in dialogue, this decision doesn't affect the game very much. When I was younger, I thought the boy just had really long hair, and I thought the girl wore pants. Turns out, I was wrong about both of these things. You can name them whatever you want, probably electing not to keep the default name of you, and you get to choose what type of weapon you want to use. The weapon system in this game is a lot of fun, and don't worry, you're always free to switch to a different weapon later. Some of my personal favorites are the glove and the hammer. Then you slap down your mailbox, it transforms into your house, and we can get this story started. So, there's this big tree, and it's like, hey, long ago, people used to use mana. But then they kinda stopped using mana, and I think it'd be pretty keen if they used mana again. And then your character wakes up from this dream, and that's it. Go do stuff. So if there's no real plot to Legend of Mana, how does one beat the game? Well, as you'll quickly learn from talking to this plant that annoyingly hangs out in your driveway, you can use these artifacts to shape the world around you. These artifacts, which have taken on a slightly different meaning thanks to modern internet slang, create new areas such as towns and dungeons for you to explore. Every artifact has its own little cutscene that helps create the new location, and these are all pretty fun to watch, but this one is definitely my favorite. In lieu of a proper start-to-finish storyline, Legend of Mana is made up of 67 individual quests, each with their own title and method for completion. Most of these follow a pretty similar formula of create a new land, go through that land, and fight the boss at the end, but there is quite a bit of variety here. Some of these quests are simply tutorials for things you'll be doing later in the game, like growing crops in your backyard orchard, or creating your own weapons and armor in your workshop. New towns usually present you with a quest that will get you to explore the entire city in some way. One of my personal favorites is in the City of Night, Lumina. in order to help a centaur sell lamps to impress a siren because he is, as the kids these days would say, a total simp, you have to actually learn how to speak the language of these creatures called dud bears so you can convince them to buy your lamps. And not to brag, but I am quite fluent in the dud bear language.
Dubba dooba dooba da ba da dooba ba dub.
So, do you have to beat all 67 quests to finish the game? No, of course not. Many of these quests are hidden pretty well, and some are even outright missable if you activate certain other flags in the game first. If anything, a playthrough where you do all 67 missions in one run is actually pretty tough. And as for how many you have to do, well, if you know what you're doing, you can beat this game by only doing 12 of them, possibly even less on New Game Plus. Though I don't really recommend this to start out, but you can definitely beat this game in just a few hours if you really wanted to. So then, how do you beat the game if I'm just going to be tossing out random numbers of quests? 12, 67, 42, 56, 19, what does any of it mean? Well, there are two requirements that players must fulfill to beat Legend of Mana. The first is that you have to grow the Tree of Mana. Every time you enter the world map, you'll be shown the progress of this tree. It goes from seed, to sprout, to sapling, to tree, you get the idea. The tree grows based on the amount of mana that is currently on your world map, and each artifact you place down has a certain amount of mana in it. This means most players will fully grow the tree without even thinking about it, as it's just a natural part of creating new areas to explore. The real trick of this game is that hidden amongst those 67 quests are special quests that belong to one of three storylines. You'll always know when you're doing one of these because they have more unique title cards than other quests. These aren't official names or anything, but I've always referred to them as the Dragon Arc, the Fairy Arc, and the Jumi Arc. The Dragon Arc is probably the most straightforward of the three. You go to the underworld, which you made out of a spoon, meet this Dogadile dude named Lark, fight your way through literal hell, and then Lark's master, Draconis, who makes Jafar look like Santa Claus, is like, "Oh, I was once the beloved king of dragons, but then 3 jealous dragons took my power. Can you pretty please get it back for me?" And everyone, like literally everyone, from you, to the dragons, to Lark's sister Sierra, to one of the 7 wisdoms, to even Lark himself is like, yeah, that dude's evil. But you do what Draconis asks, and then work together with Sierra to end up killing him. This is the only one of the 3 arcs I feel comfortable spoiling, because really, there are no surprises in this one. You could pretty much guess what was gonna happen from the moment you meet this guy. I mean, who would ever trust that mustache? The Fairy arc is potentially the most interesting, but it's the one where I feel like every single character is just stubbornly stupid. You've got this demon guy, Erwin, who stole magical powers from this girl named Matilda, so she became a 26-year-old old lady. And then you've got this warrior guy named Eskad, who wants to kill Erwin because he's a demon who wants to destroy the world because reasons, and the old lady girl is like, "Oh, that's nice, dearie, have a butterscotch." It's not a bad story, but I never really bonded with any of the characters except for Diana, the cute cat girl. And that's mostly because her role is to point out when all the stupid people are being stupid. You can side with Eskad if you really want to, but I don't personally understand why anyone would want to. He's kind of a dick. One thing that is interesting about this particular arc, though, is it's the only one that forces the player to make choices that will permanently affect the rest of your playthrough, and I can't lie, I appreciated having that kind of power. It definitely makes it one of the better arcs to tackle more than once as you do more playthroughs. Or if you want, you can even just go for the everyone dies ending. The last arc, the Jumi arc, is great. See, the Jumi are this race of humanoid people who are basically bodies built around a gemstone core. And before anyone says it, I'd like to remind you all that Legend of Mana was about 14 years before Steven Universe. The story mostly centers around Elazil, a lapis lazuli knight, and his Pearl Guardian, cleverly named Pearl.
I feel like you can tell a lot about a person based on which character comes to their mind when you say the name Pearl.
Since the Jumi race have been hunted to near extinction, since in olden times people used to collect and sell their cores, Elazil seeks to find other Jumi. You do meet a couple of others across your journey, some you even meet completely independently of Pearl and Elazil. but you're often met with opposition in the form of a jewel thief named Sandra. I really don't want to spoil too much because I believe this is the best set of quests in this entire game. The plight of the Jumi is a sympathetic one, the characters you meet are all pretty substantial, and while most quests treat your character as the silent video game protagonist you clearly are, the Jumi arc finds a way to include your character in a way that feels genuinely meaningful. I definitely recommend seeing this questline through to the end. After you've fully grown the mana tree and completed the final quest of any of the 3 arcs, when you return to your house you'll be given a story-related quest called Cage of Dreams. It turns out that plant thing that's been loitering on your lawn is destined to become the Tree of Mana. And now there are 3 of them. Good! I love that there are now 3 of them blocking my path. So, after completing this quest, you'll get the Sword of Mana. No, not that one. And use it to create the tree, allowing you to do the 68th quest, Legend of Mana, the final quest in the game, and it's fine. I have strong memories of so much of this game, but somehow the ending never really sticks with me all that much. Legend of Mana is definitely more about the journey than the destination. Also, the final boss is really nothing special. I won't spoil what it is, but I will say I've never wished more for a final boss in a JRPG to have a second form. It feels a little underwhelming, especially compared to the final bosses of any of the main stories you already did. Like, all 3 arcs have better final bosses compared to the actual final boss. Outside of the main 3 arcs, there are several other characters or factions of characters that you'll often run into throughout your journeys. One of the most notable is the big fat money-grubbing rabbit merchant, Niccolo. If you've ever played Animal Crossing and dealt with Red, you're probably pretty familiar with the type of energy Niccolo gives off. There's also Capella and Diddle, a pair of street performers, the aforementioned Dudbears, who are miners, and their god, a dog named Putty, a siren named Ellie, who you can actually unlock as a party member, and a personal favorite of mine, Cap'n Tusk and his pirate penguin crew. I mean, their quests are some of the worst and most frustrating things in this game, but I do like the characters themselves. And most of these characters are memorable, because honestly, there are plenty of instances where this game is just really funny. One of my favorite quests is one of the easiest in the game. You bring Niccolo to the blacksmith Watts to sell him some materials. Watts says he can't pay because he lost his gator skin wallet, but says if we bring him some gator skin, he can make a new wallet and he'll pay us with the money in that. So he makes the wallet, discovers there's no money in it, and accuses us of stealing it. So in lieu of payment, Niccolo just takes a bunch of weapons and armor that Watts made. Assuming you already have gator skin, this quest is literally just going in and out of Watts' shop like 5 times and watching them talk, but it still makes me laugh every time. And hey, if you don't like any of the party members, you can always just have you. You can literally load a character from another save file of the game to be your party member. I didn't know where else to put this in the video, but I think that is a really cool addition. Aside from having a party member, you'll also be allowed to bring along one pet or golem. Most pets are obtained from catching these monster eggs you find out in the wild, but before you can catch eggs, you'll have to do a quest called Monster Corral, where you'll get an egg which will always contain a rabbite, which I named Doofus. I love him and I would die for him. Oh wait, did I say always? I meant to say always, unless you have save data on your memory card from Final Fantasy VIII. Then you get a chocobo, and that's way better. On my main journey, I also obtained a polterbox named Boxworthy, a Malboro I named Squishface, a Zombine named Brian's, with a Z, and my personal golem, 80085. He's not very smart. He doesn't move much. I'm not good at making golems, okay? And lastly, the only pet in the entire game to specifically have a quest centered on him is Tickle the Sahagin. This fish dude was dabbing way before it was cool. I'm just kidding. Dabbing was never cool. I'd also like to give some quick love to Boko the Chocobo, Guri the Goblin, and Yashi the Kid Dragon, as they were the pets in my secondary save file that I did mainly to get very specific footage. The truth is, pets are rarely all that useful, but I love that the game just has pets in it. I love any game with monster raising mechanics. There's really only one quest in this game that requires you to have a pet partner with you, and that's during the Dragon Arc. It's nice having them in battle, even if they aren't doing a lot, and for better or worse, the game does this amazing thing where certain story events won't kick in until your pet is also in its designated spot, and it completely sucks the tension out of certain scenes in the best kind of way. Brian's is doing his best, okay? Now, to be fair, you can raise your pets to increase their stats and AI and stuff in battle by feeding them certain fruit you grow in your orchard. But honestly, it's a lot of work, and it's not like this game is ever so hard I felt like I had to do that. Even if you do die, Legend of Mana is one of the most forgiving games I've ever seen. Anytime a character dies, a meter starts filling up, and when it's filled, that character is revived with full health. The only way to lose is if you, your party member, and your pet are all dead at the same time. But even if that happens, the game just lets you immediately load back from the start of whatever area you were in. And while the AI in this game is fine, one of the best things about this game is you can actually have a friend join in the fun and take control of your party member. I actually really recommend playing the game this way, because then you can coordinate things a little better. Like, for example, saying to your friend, hey, I'm about to use one of my special techniques. Maybe don't hit the boss with a heavy attack so they get knocked out of my range. Just as an example. Elazol. Alright, so before we move on, I want to go over a couple other things I love about this game. You've probably already noticed this first one yourself, but this game is really pretty. Like, holy crap, this game is gorgeous. Every single area feels like a painting, and there's moving elements that really make this world feel alive. The character and monster sprites are so well animated, just everything is so dang pretty. This is one of the first games I ever played where I was like, man, I really want to be here. One of the areas is the decaying flying carcass of a giant worm, and whether you're outside or inside of this thing, dang, it's pretty! And probably smells horrible, but it's pretty. The towns are some of my favorites. I love the nighttime streets of Lumina. I adore the seashell resort feel of Polpata. I am enamored by the sleek whites and golds of Geo, and of course, I am so in love with that quaint hometown nature of Domina. Even the underworld, actual hell, doesn't seem that bad. Everyone gets their own apartment with like a bed and stuff. It seems pretty nice. And not only does the game look great, but the music, hands down, this is possibly the greatest soundtrack in all of video games. Legend of Mana's soundtrack was done by industry legend Yoko Shimomura, whom you might know from stuff like Super Mario RPG and the Kingdom Hearts series. And yeah, guess what? Even with that kind of pedigree, she herself has said that Legend of Mana is some of her best work. Every single track in this game is amazing, and it fits the atmosphere so well. From the comforting tones of your home that actually softens when you go inside in a way that tells you this is a safe place. To the religious cliff tops of Gato Grottos. The hauntingly empty streets of the Bejeweled City, former home of the Jumi race. And of course, Pain the Universe, which is one of the best boss themes in all of video games. Speaking of battle music, a little touch I love is that Legend of Mana doesn't really have any. Why let yourself get sucked out of an area's fantastic music when you can just let the music keep playing? It works perfectly. Honestly, I could sit here and just play the entire soundtrack for y'all and be happy, but we'll move on. But despite all of that, do you know what I love the most? Do you want to know what my absolute favorite thing in this entire game is? How alive these characters feel, and how having a certain party member with you at a certain time can actually lead to new discoveries. And yes, I do have a couple of my favorite examples ready to go. So, two characters you meet pretty early on are Bud and Lisa, two young siblings who got kicked out of the Academy of Magic in Geo and wind up moving in with you. What's great about these two is they mainly exist so that you'll always have a party member that you can just pick up and go. When you actually go to Geo, the streets are filled with these identical looking student NPCs, and guess what? If you bring Bud or Lisa with you, they all know each other because they used to be classmates, so you get to learn everyone's name and a little quirk about them. How else would you know that the one student who randomly talks like an old man is named Sage? You wouldn't, that's how. Or how this one student totally has a crush on Lisa. You can only learn that by bringing them with you. The first quest you do in Gato Grottos involves the jewel thief killing a Jumi knight named Rubens. And naturally, if you have Pearl or Elazul with you on this quest, they talk to each other. Quite a bit, actually. It changes the entire mood of the quest to have one of them in your party. There's this entire back and forth that only exists because you brought them along at this exact moment. And hey, Rubens may be dead, but guess what? That means he goes to the underworld, and you can totally go visit him in his room. And yes, if you bring Pearl or Elazul with you, there's more unique dialogue. One quest, Drowned Dreams, just involves a magical gem called the Blue Eye. It never seems that connected to the Jumi outside of the Jewel Thief, but if you have a Jumi with you, you discover, yeah, that's a Jumi core. The two Siren characters, Ellie and Monique, are friends, so naturally, if you bring Ellie to Monique's lamp shop, they, you guessed it, have dialogue together. Even that total simp Gilbert can't resist hitting on Ellie if you bring her along to wherever he happens to be hanging out. If you bring Sierra to the underworld to be reunited with her brother Lark, they chat like they haven't seen each other since high school and just happen to bump into each other at Target. Okay, so look, they aren't all great, but I still appreciate that it's there. And speaking of characters you can bring to the underworld, if you bring Escad down there, who claims to have been trained by one of the Wisdoms, Olban, they have a special conversation. And Olban even switches to a sprite that I'd never seen before, and I genuinely thought I was about to unlock a secret boss fight or something, but no, he won't fight us.
I'm not crying because that was a total tease. I'm crying because your head looks like an onion.
I also learned, completely by accident, that the Flowerling characters that exist as a teleportation service in certain areas won't teleport you if Niccolo is in your party, because they don't want to reveal their powers to him, since in another quest, he specifically tried to capture one of them because of those powers. Legend of Mana is filled with little things like this, and I feel like every time I beat this game, I discover something new about it. Like, bringing Pearl to the underworld, I'd honestly never done that before this particular playthrough, and I'm pretty sure I got extra special dialogue specifically because I was doing this on the last quest of the Jumi arc. Even something as minor as Diana giving me this row of confused dots when I chose to bring her along on this random mission had me wondering just how many other party member interactions I've never actually discovered. The game is just loaded with little Easter eggs and bonus content like this. Like the FF8 save data chocobo thing, but there's also a secret boss fight if you return to the second dragon's castle after beating him, but before beating Draconis, where you get to fight Deathbringer 2. And if you've got save data for the game Saga Frontier 2, you apparently get a bonus scene and a special sword when you fight this guy. I've never even seen that scene, because I've never played Saga Frontier 2. Also, did you know you can get a penguin and her little bebe to move into your house by killing enough crabs at the beach? Cause I didn't. I only learned about that a few months ago, because actually trying to crush enough crabs is really freaking frustrating. One other little thing I love is at the end of each quest you can go to your house and talk to Lil Cactus, who will write about all your adventures in his private diary once you leave. These don't serve much purpose, but they're just really cute and well worth reading through. Folks, I really like this game. So yeah, I think I've made it pretty clear that Legend of Mana is my favorite game of all time, but does that mean I think it's perfect? No, of course not. I'm not really a big fan of how every single battle in this game is predetermined, which means you will always fight the exact same enemies in the exact same spot in the exact same room every time you enter it. And when a large chunk of this game's point is using the same locations multiple times, some of these fights can start to feel a little repetitive. I'm also not a big fan of how experience works. Whenever you beat an enemy, they might drop these blue crystals, and if you want to get experience points, you have to collect them. This is fine and dandy for you, but it can be a huge pain when you're trying to raise pets, because you have to just, hope they pick some up, and they often don't. There's actually a ring item you can get from a pretty early quest that basically acts like an experience share, and honestly, I tend to just keep that thing on. But since enemies don't always reward experience, it's possible, and honestly quite frequent, to end a fight without getting any experience. Also, for how amazing this game's boss music is, boss battles themselves aren't that exciting. The bosses all look pretty cool, but 90% of the time you'll either be wailing on them to try and get them into a stun lock, or when you see them start flashing, you'll be running far away from them, because that means they're doing a special technique, which means they're invincible until it's over. Sometimes this can be really frustrating, like this boss here, he wasn't hard, he just spent over half the fight being invincible. It was more tedious than anything. And then of course I already mentioned the ending, which has this seemingly dramatic cutscene, except it uses Comic Sans, which definitely sucked me out of the experience somewhat. And then it ends with Niccolo breaking into my house, and then the credits roll. Once it's all over, you can jump into New Game Plus, which resets your world map and quests, but lets you keep things like your level, your pets, and your workshops. You'll also have access to a special book in your library called the Forbidden Tome, which lets you change the difficulty settings. You can play on Nightmare Mode, which is a pretty standard hard mode, or the terrifying No Future mode, where literally every single enemy from the tiniest Rabbite to Draconis himself is level 99. I do not recommend this until you are good and ready for it. Legend of Mana isn't a game for everyone, and I can definitely understand it not being someone's cup of tea, because did you know, back when I first played this game, I actually hated it. I hated the lack of direction, I hated that it didn't feel like it had a proper storyline. But at a certain point, I started discovering things on my own, and getting really invested in some of these quests, and it just clicked. Also, I was a dumb 10-year-old, and I accidentally set my party member to be controlled by player 2, and then I got frustrated because they weren't moving, and I couldn't do anything, and it got really annoying. That's on me, I was stupid. So yeah, going back to what I said earlier, I'm sorry if this wasn't a particularly funny video, or if I got a little rambly in places, but folks, I really love this game, and it means the world to me to be able to share that with all of you. And if I'm really lucky, maybe I've even encouraged some of you out there to give it a try for yourselves. Physical copies are a little pricey these days, but if you've got a PS3, PSP, or Vita, you can easily pick it up on PlayStation Network, and I highly recommend it. And yeah, I could probably talk about this game for hours and hours, but this seems like a pretty good place to wrap things up. I am really glad I finally got to talk about my favorite game of all time. And hey, you at home, let me know if you ever want to hear me talk about any of the other Mana games. I mean, eventually someone's got to talk about Dawn of Mana, right? Hey there everyone, and thank you for watching this video on my all-time favorite game. If you liked this video, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. Extra special thanks to my Patreon supporters, and if you'd like to see your name in this ending crawl, consider pledging today. I'll be seeing you all in the next video, but until then, take care.